9 rings for mortal men, doomed to die. The Ring Wraiths, the Ulari to the elves, Black Riders to the hobbits, the Nazgul. They are Sauron's most terrifying and deadly servants. Even the greatest heroes are frightened by them. During the Siege of Gondor, Gandalf confides to Pippin that he is no match for the Witch King. Gandalf the White, one of the eternal gods of Middle-earth, one of the mightiest of all the Maiar, yet still no match against this Ringwraith. But what powers do the Nazgul actually possess? How deadly are they, really? Under that gloriously frightening hood, what exactly can they even do? Think about it. Do we, or our heroes, ever witness them actually fighting or displaying an extreme show of force or power? Do we ever witness them killing a warrior or a hero, or anyone actually, for that matter? Yes, they run down the poor watchman at Bree, but it's their horses that actually do the trampling. In the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, the great warrior king Theoden dies, but he dies by his own horse falling on him, not directly by the hand of a Nazgul. It's curious. In this video, I want to explore this question. What powers do the Nazgul actually possess? And are they even any good? I think the answer to this question might just surprise you. Well, welcome to our channel. Here we discuss interesting ideas and lore surrounding Middle-earth. If you enjoy this type of content, please consider liking or subscribing. Thanks. Okay, let's dive in. What powers did the Nazgul actually have? And how deadly were they? To answer this, I think it's best if we start at the beginning. Who were the Nazgul? And what did the 9 rings actually do to them? Well, long ago Sauron gave 9 rings to 9 mortal men. Some of these were kings, 3 of them were Númenóreans, but all became great heroes and warlords of old, but at a great price. You see, the 9 rings have 2 basic functions. Their first purpose, they allowed Sauron to manipulate the wearer's mind and thoughts. Slowly, one by one, each of them faded and fell under Sauron's control. They became his most loyal servants and completely unable to disobey any of Sauron's commands. As a result, they were the perfect choice to find and recover his ring. For Sauron knew that of all his servants, they were the only ones that would bring him back the ring without hesitation. So who were the Black Riders? Well, put simply, they were 9 human heroes that had fallen under the eternal spell of Sauron. The second purpose of the 9 rings was nothing less than the greatest desire of all men, to delay death and extend life. Now it was God himself, Eru Ilúvatar, that gave life to men, and only he could really grant them additional life. But the rings don't actually increase life. Instead, they stretch it out slowly over time. As the long centuries went by, the Ringwraiths became less and less alive, more and more stretched and thin and faded, till at last they are all but ghosts, whispers of themselves really, mostly existing in the spirit world, but still with a tiny minute living presence here in the physical plane, anchoring them to the real world and delaying their death. They are alive, yes, but just barely. As they are primarily ghosts or wraiths, They had become invisible to most eyes, only truly seen by those who could see the world of spirits. They no longer had solid shape or form in the real world, so they had to cover themselves in cloaks and hoods in order to interact with things. Their ghost-like presence filled the empty spaces inside their gauntlets, allowing them to hold a sword or mace or open a door. So what did the rings actually do to them? They helped them to delay death and remain alive, but at the terrible cost of their physical self. By viewing the Ringwraiths from this perspective, as mostly being a spirit or ghost, some of their apparent powers start to make sense. For example, while traveling down the Anduin River, our heroes saw a Nazgul flying extremely high in the night sky, riding on a fell beast of Mordor. Suddenly, the great bow that Galadriel had gifted to Legolas sang as the elf shot a single arrow high into the air and struck the beast. It fell out of the sky and crashed to the ground, and yet the Nazgul survived the enormous fall. You see, as shapeless spiritual forms, it would make sense that they are mostly immune to fall damage. Near the borders of Rivendell, Elrond the Half-Elven caused the river Bruninian to swell and send a great flood to engulf 5 of the Nazgul. Their horses were drowned, but the Nazgul themselves were unhurt. Their predominantly spiritual forms cannot really be drowned. Now they lost their robes and armor, and so they were unable to properly interact with the physical world, and they had to, walk back to Mordor to gain new ones. But they were immune to the percussive force of the water. You see, they're mostly a ghost. But their most potent power, by far, was fear. Fear, an unreasonable, heart-stomping, mind-numbing fear. Have you ever walked into a dark room or basement, but at the edge of your vision seen, or perhaps thought you saw something there? Now you know deep down that ghosts are unreal and the idea is harmless, but yet you find yourself shaken with a sudden rush of fear. Your heart stops for a moment, and for a few seconds your mind races, until you gain control and remind yourself that ghosts are a fantasy. The threat, the danger, the fear, it's merely an illusion. A bygone remnant, perhaps, of an ancient fear from a more primitive past. You see, this is the true power of the Nine. This is the effect of the Ringwraiths. The living around them are suddenly stricken with an irrational, yet uncontrollable fear. Similar to our everyday encounters with spooky feelings, but just turned up to 11. We see hardened Gondorian warriors, professionals who have battled through years of war, fall to the ground and cover their faces in fright. We see great heroes and kings and soldiers immediately turn and run in terror. So what were the Black Riders' great power? Why were the Ringwraiths so effective? It's because their unnatural, ghostly presence instilled the fear of death in all of the living around them. Alright, so now that we have a deeper understanding of the nature of the Nazgul, I think we're ready to circle back and answer the original question. What powers did the Nazgul actually have? And how deadly were they? Well, firstly, they are unaffected by many types of physical damage. Secondly, they cause fear and terror in those around them. But aside from those two things, they were essentially Well, just men. Let's consider their attack. The Black Riders use swords and daggers, maces, typical weapons, just like other men. They don't appear to have any special means of inflicting pain or attacking others. Honestly, the mounts that they ride seem to be more physically dangerous than they are. And what about their defense? Well, they also have to protect themselves, which is why they wear armor, just like any other men. We often see them as leaders of soldiers, but notice they typically let others do the work, and mostly stay out of the main battle. I suspect that they are ever afraid of death, and can probably be mostly slain by an enemy sword, just like you or me. Many of the wise, Gandalf, Elrond, they tell us that they are immune to normal weapons, but I think they are just, well, afraid. You see, the Nazgul are like the imaginary ghosts that frighten us in the real world. The fear is unreasonable. It's irrational. It's an illusion. It's all bark and no bite, as they say. In truth, the Ringwraiths are probably some of the weakest of all the servants of Sauron. If one could control their fear, just like a typical spooky event in our real world, the Ringwraiths are shown to be not so dangerous after all. Consider this. At Weathertop, Aragorn famously fights 5 Nazgul, 1v5. In the books, he has no sword, no shield, no armor, and he fights with 2 tree branches that he pulled from the campfire. Now, I fully suspect that Aragorn was super impressive with his ninja-like handling of those 2 branches, but against soldiers with armor and swords, 5 of them, and yet Aragorn won. It's unclear how sticks could even hurt someone in full armor. The Nazgul were poor fighters. They had already stabbed Frodo. Yes, this is true. But make no mistake, they would have preferred to have taken him right then and there. But Aragorn could control his fear, and therefore they really were unequipped to handle him, even 1v5. They fled in fear of Aragorn and his 2 sticks. Or consider what happened in Crickhollow. The Black Riders were tricked into thinking that Frodo was staying in a home in Crickhollow. 3 Nazgul attacked in the early hours of the night. But Fatty Bolger raised the alarm, and the hobbits of Crickhollow sounded great horns. Dozens of hobbits, awoken from sleep, came out to protect their homes. And the 3 Nazgul fled away as fast as they could. They fled from the hobbits of Buckland, still half asleep and probably unarmed. You see, they're not the great warriors that others would have you believe. Or who can forget old Farmer Maggot, one of the most epic hobbits this side of the water. When a Nazgul rode up to his farmhouse and threatened him, this hobbit stood his ground and told the Black Rider to leave, or he would sick his 2 dogs on him. That Black Rider turned tail and fled as fast as his horse could carry him. While I have the greatest respect for a simple, tough-as-nails farmer, he was still just one small hobbit. Not a warrior, not a trained soldier, a farmer. And the Nazgul fled. Fled because fear was really his only weapon. Even in Hobbiton, way back at the very beginning of the journey, one of the Nazgul threatened Sam's father. The old gaffer promptly told the Nazgul to get lost, and he hissed at the hobbit and rode away. You see, in the end, I suspect that the Nazgul were always in fear of their own death. That's why they so often ran from danger. Their very existence was almost dedicated to the idea of avoiding death. In an ironic way, they spread a great fear of death to everyone else around them, but perhaps in some ways to hide their very own fears. They were talented leaders, of course, but in actual danger, I think they were just bullies. Cowardly and harmless once one stands up to them. Gandalf, soldiers, heroes, other orcs, even Tolkien himself to a smaller degree, they tell us differently. They tell us that the Nazgul are dangerous and deadly, but I think they have just fallen prey to their own fears. In the end, they were like ghosts we think we see in real life. They can be frightening and difficult to confront, but when one exposes it to the light of day, or the turning on of a lamp, they are proven to be nothing to truly fear.